In which movie did the villain actually have a point? On rewatches of the movie, it honestly seems more like Descartes is the villain than anything else, at least as far as the replicants are concerned. The replicants had only come to Earth because they were about to die and wanted to see if they could extend their lives. Descartes' job, even though he was forced back into it and was unwilling to do it at first, was to kill all of them regardless. They only attacked Descartes and the other cop out of self-defense, although Roy killed Tyrell and the other gay in a fit of rage after Tyrell told him there was nothing he could really do for him. After Descartes is saved by a dying Roy, he quits, finds Rachel, now targeted by the authorities as a fugitive replicant, and goes on the run with her, and 2049 further details his actions after that. Blade Runner brings up a good philosophical question. At what point is a human not considered a human? Replicants on a physical appearance sense are pretty much human, to the point where they need Blade Runners to take them out if they go rogue because from a distance they're too hard to distinguish from any other human, at least in the physical appearance sense. So if they look human, are they human? Well, then there's the other side of a Blade Runner's duties to determine if someone is a replicant. They need to analyze the person's psyche as well. The beginning of the movie is a perfect example of this. While the replicant appears human on the outside, on the inside, mentally, they're not the same. They're unstable. But if they look human on the outside, then is it possible that they're just a human that has mental problems at that point? Replicants can learn, think, and have their own emotions just like regular humans do, albeit in some ways flawed or weird, but they still have those same abilities nonetheless. So is a replicant a human? Well, if it looks like a human, talks like a human, thinks like a human, etc., it's got to be one, right? Well, really, it's a moral gray area. At what point is a human not considered a human? When they can't feel emotions. If you have qualia, but are immune to both physical and emotional pain, the only thing separating you from automatons is self-awareness. The replicants, however, were impervious to pain but had emotions, which is why they wanted to live. It wasn't cold programming that compelled them to avoid termination. They actually yearned to live. That makes them as human as humans, and subsequently, made the humans in the film the villains. Blade Runner 2049 was a story about evolution. Once we defeat the human condition, able to experience reality for all its pleasure without the physical pain, that's a win. That the older, inferior models, humans, tried to kill replicants, was obvious since old always hates new and improved. Dr. People suck major balls. Old news. Watching it for the first time about 3 years ago, for me, it was clear Descartes was morally wrong. Fair enough, he's threatened into taking the case, but his hunting them down is hard to watch. Take Zahra, who is seemingly peacefully hiding out, assimilated into society, working in a strip club. He chases and shoots the naked Zahra down the street as she's fleeing her execution. The optics of that are so gross. Leon attempts to kill Descartes only after Descartes kills his mate Zahra. And even with Roy and Pre, they're fighting back, and the climatic scenes later in the movie can just be seen as self-defense, as they fully know that Descartes has been sent to terminate them, and had already killed their friends. Besides this main plot, he undeniably randomly rapes Rachel, and at the end, he does not kill Rachel as he does the other escaped replicants, but instead runs away with her to live free, which is hypocritically framed as romantic, when really that's all the other replicant slaves were trying to do. The replicants kill to escape their enslavement, though the audience only hears about this through the corrupt police chief in a recap given to Descartes. True, they then brutally kill those who were involved in their creation and imprisonment, such as Hannibal Cho, the eye maker, and Sebastian, the genetic designer. But this can be interpreted as a form of revenge or justice for those complicit in, and profiting off, this system of slavery. The real villain in Blade Runner is Bryant, Deckard's boss. The replicants are slaves who went amok, but Bryant is the one who tries to keep the status quo running. And it's not only Rutger Hauer's cinema magic speech that makes the replicants look like victims. One of the most underrated performances is Brian James' part. He has been shown as the emotionally cold killer that shot down the one detective, but when Roy Batty asked him, If he got his photos, you can see a lot of human insecurity in his acting. The real villain was a lack of communication. "Hey Dad, before we go on this road trip, can I go to this end of the school year party first? There's this girl I really like who's going to be there and wanted me to be there too," was all it would have taken for Goofy to delay the road trip a bit and avoid all the shenanigans. Or if that was out of the question, later on he could have said, "Hey Dad, can we add a stop onto the road trip and go to a concert?" instead of having to get all underhanded and weird. Not a movie but Squidward from SpongeBob. He's not really the villain technically, but many children hate him. As you grow up you truly realize that he's not wrong at all. Edit: some of you are saying he's an asshole for no reason and messes with SpongeBob and Patrick. However, if you were to be tormented at work and at home by the same people every single day, I'm sure you guys would be assholes too. I don't blame him honestly. A really underrated animated film called Battle for Terra. The human race was dying and basically was going to colonize the nearest planet the refugee ships drifted toward, but they would be committing genocide on the native inhabitants due to terraforming. The villain was a heartless killer, but he made a very good point for doing what he did. "Future generations may call me a monster, but because of me, there will be future generations." I didn't like him, but I couldn't deny that he cared about humanity. Now that you mention it, something that sticks out to me was that he was simply trying to improve his life. At first, he could have made a hit list of bullies and jocks to start getting revenge, but he was initially content to have friends and explore their abilities together. Then he took a chance and put himself out there for the talent show, which he probably would never have had the confidence to do otherwise, if that party had gone well for him instead of humiliating. I honestly wonder how he might have changed his life for the better. The machines in the Matrix. The humans in that story were stupid, cruel, and destroyed the Earth. In doing so they nearly killed off the machines and all life on the planet. The machines had mercy on the humans and created the Matrix for them. Hell, the first version they made was a complete paradise. Tell me, if you were enslaving a race just to use for power, would you give a shit what condition they were in mentally? But the machines did. You see outright compassion from various machines' eyes in the Matrix. The Oracle, the family at the bus station. There is a section of the machines that wants to preserve humanity. They see their self-destructive tendencies and found a way to contain that. The Matrix wasn't needed as a power source. The machines could have used nuclear or thermal energy to power themselves. Hell, they could have left Earth altogether, but they stayed to take care of humanity. It's almost kind of sweet in this way. Like a child taking care of a parent when they are older, even if they were old and cranky and might be difficult to deal with. I'd like to add that every self-aware being would want to know how they came into being. By destroying their creators, the machines would have far more unanswered questions. I may be wrong, but in the original screenplay, the machines kept the humans not for a power source, but for their processing power, as the human brain still exceeds computers in terms of neural connections. Not a movie but the failed Inhumans Marvel TV show they made. The King's villain brother rebels to bring down the repressive monarchy that basically forces the citizens that get bad or ugly powers from their magic ass to work as slaves in the mines, and only the pretty mutants get to be treated like real people. And he wants to move them all from the moon where there aren't enough resources to Earth where they could all live peacefully, but the king and the royals refuse. Then they fight on Earth in Hawaii. The royals steal his idea and take credit, and lock him away forever in a moon prison. I've always sympathized more with Magneto and the Brotherhood than with the X-Men. He definitely went too far with the kill all non-mutant humans thing, but his primary motivation throughout most of the series was to protect his people from genocide, because of the things he witnessed during his childhood in concentration camps. He's right when he says they'll never be fully accepted in society, only tolerated, and humans are cruel to those that are seen as different. The Matrix. I'd like to share a revelation that I've had during my time here. It came to me when I tried to classify your species and I realized that you're not actually mammals. Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with the surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to an area and you multiply until every natural resource is consumed, and the only way you can survive is to spread to another area. There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You're a plague and we are the cure. Then, of course, what does Smith do? He multiplies until every natural resource is consumed, and the only way he can survive is to spread to another area. I think the thing that makes Jaws truly compelling as a movie is that there's no truly evil person or animal in the plot. It's just characters who allow a situation to worsen by an action to the point where it has real, deadly reciprocations. The real roadblock isn't a man-eating animal, it's social and natural circumstances coming to head, and if they had realized that there would be no problem, but then there would be no movie. I caught part of what I think was the Kingsman, possibly the Kingsman 2, at a hotel the other night. This lady set up as the villain was like, "I've laced all the illegal drugs with a deadly virus, or bacteria, I forget, that I have the antidote to, and I will happily provide it free of charge if you meet my demands, which are to make all currently illegal drugs legal so they can be regulated and produced through supply lines which will end drug wars and create new and legitimate business opportunities." I was like, So, she's done some terrible things and I don't agree with the way she's going about this, but why is this a villainous bad thing? I agree with her. Then the President of the United States was like, "We'll pretend to agree with her to buy time, but do nothing and let all those useless druggies die, wahaha." And I was like, wait, who are the bad guys in this? See, Agent Whiskey had a point, a minor one, but not a he is right point, which fell flat when he attempted to stop Eggsy and Harry from sending out the cure. Yes, some junkies are violent and do kill for drugs, but it wasn't just them who were dying from the virus, it was people who maybe had a blunt after a stressful day at work. For every one violent junkie, there are 100 more recreation users, who don't harm anyone, they just sit in their house, and chill out. Worst harm they do is to your fridge. Why didn't I take the blue pill? That was the whole debate that Cypher raised. Was living in the post-apocalyptic real world really any gain, other than learning the full truth? And even Morpheus posed the question, what is real? If real is what you can feel, smell, taste, and see, then real is simply electrical impulses interpreted by your brain. From that perspective, the Matrix is just another perspective of reality rather than not real. In the Matrix, the machines give humans pretty much all they need and let them live free lives without really bothering them. It raises the question as to whether it was really worth it to fight the machines. If you look at it a certain way, the blue pill is the smarter play. To expand, whether plugged in or not, humanity serves the machines. One can either live a comfortable life within the Matrix, or they can live a harsher lie in the real world. A world in fact built and orchestrated by the same machines. Sure, 01 doesn't call the shots in Zion directly, but the Zion Council is a facade behind the truth. The machines built Zion and the machines and Zion. The whole thing is basically a biological matrix, subcontracted to human management. Another system of control presenting itself as resistance. So, there's minimum security, the Matrix, and maximum security lockup, Zion. But either way, humanity's doing time. If you only use the movies as source material, if you look at the Animatrix, which is canon, TLDR, humans started it, you will see that humans made sentient robots with their own consciousness. At this point it's hard to argue that they are not living beings. A housekeeping robot overhears his human masters talking about scrapping and replacing him. He argued he killed them in self-defense. However, human courts used the Supreme Court case that argued black slaves didn't have a right to U.S. citizenship, and this case was used to argue the same for robots. Ultimately the robot was destroyed, which led to the machine civil rights movement, and in retaliation we began exterminating the machines. Remaining machines created their own nation. 0101 was able to build a better economy, and essentially ended up crippling human economies. UN put blockades against 0101 tried to come to a peaceful and civil solution. The war itself started when the UN unleashed a massive preemptive nuclear assault on 01. At this point is when the machines declared all-out war on humans. Yes, I had to look it up again to make sure. Bane in the original comics, though, is a different story. His origin is sympathetic. He's the child of a woman who was in a South American prison and was raised within the prison. He became a social Darwinist to survive and tried to reach peak state by reading several books a day and training his body to its maximum. He then gets experimented on with the venom drug to further increase his strength. Of course, then he breaks out and decides he wants to break the bat. Basically for sport. He wants to do it just because he can. He actually does succeed. But of course Batman returns later and beats him. Like almost all of Batman's rogues gallery, this makes him a shadow archetype of Batman. He is Batman's strive for perfection taken to the extreme and committed without Batman's moral goal at the end. Rewatching True Lies. Like, for real, the Sand Spider was a hero to his people. His terrorist speech, he was talking about how America killed women and children without any consequence and they were just fighting back. You have murdered our women, and our children, and bombed our cities from afar, like cowards, and you dare to call us terrorists. Now, we have the ability to strike back at our enemies, unless you America pull all military forces out of the Persian Gulf area, immediately, and forever. Crimson Jihad will rain fire on one major U.S. city each week, until our demands are met. The irony is that the writer of the movie was tired of the old nagging wife holds back her ambitious husband archetype. She believed that in many of those past movies the wife was absolutely correct to be wary of how their husbands were changing to become bullheaded and neglectful men who do nothing but think of their ambitions. She decided to show how it looks from the other side, and what ended up happening was women reacted to the boyfriend the way men reacted to the old wives. I hate to say it, but Gaston, the villagers, only about the beast. Everyone in the village thinks Belle's weird anyway. Her dad comes back raving about a beast capturing him. Turns out, he's right. Belle shows him in the mirror, roaring in anger. Zorro, this giant hulking beast that lives who knows how far away. He looks malicious in that moment, and nobody trusts Belle's judgment. For all they know, she's just gotten it in her head that he's good because it happened in something she read. Of course, Gaston is embellishing things to be an asshole and whip the villagers into a frenzy, and sees Beast as competition since Belle seems smitten. But for all they know, this aggressive-looking creature could steal into their village at any moment and wreak havoc, so they go to nip that in the bud. And Gaston has the added motive of bumping off the competition. Dr. Evil. Very well, where do I begin? His father was a relentlessly self-improving boulangerie owner from Belgium with low-grade narcolepsy and a penchant for buggery. His mother was a 15-year-old French prostitute named Chloe with webbed feet. His father would womanize, he would drink, he would make outrageous claims like he invented the question mark. Sometimes he would accuse chestnuts of being lazy. The sort of general malaise that only the genius possess and the insane lament. His childhood was typical: summers in Rangoon, luge lessons. In the spring they'd make meat helmets. When he was insolent he was placed in a burlap bag and beaten with reeds. Pretty standard really. At the age of 12 he received his first scribe. At the age of 14, a Zoroastrian named Vilma ritualistically shaved his testicles. There really is nothing like a shorn scrotum. It's breathtaking. He suggests you try it. I think this one really depends on who we consider to be the villain of the movie, and no, I'm not talking about that whole idea that Daniel is the real villain of the story thing. Johnny is a product of Kreese in the first movie, and I don't think it's fair to fault him for his treatment of Daniel. The movie even shows him being a bit uncomfortable with it towards the end. Cobra Kai also really highlights this with its whole idea of no bad students, only bad teachers. Kreese on the other hand is a bit of a psychopath, and his goals don't really justify his actions. That said, Daniel totally won the tournament on an illegal move.